This week's parasha begins with the phrase Vayera Elav Adonai Ba'alanei Mamre, and God appeared to Avraham in the terebinths of Mamre. And the commentators ask, why is God appearing to Avraham in this moment? And Sforno actually says that it is God who has come to assure Avraham that God is committed to the covenant. Because at the end of last week's parasha, actually there are two covenants in last week's parasha. There's a screaming covenant, and there's the covenant of the pieces, where God promises Avraham that he'll have children, and then there's the covenant of Brit Milah, which concludes the parasha, and Avraham circumcises himself and the entire family. And the appearance of God to Avraham, according to Sforno, is to assure Avraham that God is committed to the covenant and to honor that, to accompany Avraham in this moment. And he actually points to the fact also that it's just like at the beginning of Parashat Nitzavim, where it says, Atem Nitzavim Kolchem Hayom, that everyone stands today and God essentially is appearing to them again. And then he also points out that it's parallel to another covenantal moment in the Book of Kings. So even though we didn't necessarily say, okay, Parashat Vayera is the day that we're going to launch our community covenant, there's something deeply embedded in the tradition that begins really with Avraham, although obviously there's a covenant with Noach, but our particularized covenant as a Jewish people in the notion of covenant at all, and the notion of being bound together with God in partnership and in community, and also in an eternal covenant that the Torah takes us from Abraham's covenant, of course, and then to Sinai, which is and actually the redemption of Egypt is a fulfillment of the covenant of Avraham, because Avraham is told that they're going to be enslaved for many years and that they will be redeemed. Then Sinai, then Devarim, then the book of Joshua, and then Kings. And so we have this ongoing covenant of which we stand today amongst a part of that. And we as a community also are enveloped in that covenant, and yet also have to find ways to mark the sense of its continuity and its particularity. And so I wanted to ask you, and actually I was looking back at Rabbi Neil Gilman, Dr. Neil Gilman's book, Sacred Fragments, which is actually about building a theology, but he spends a lot of time talking about covenant, and he says that there's no more central theme in Jewish self-perception than covenant. It's the single indispensable key to understanding the way the Jewish religion evolved from its earliest beginnings. The linchpin of Jewish myth, the structure that Jews use to lend meaning to their experience, is covenant. And I want to ask you really, how do you understand the notion, or do you agree with this notion that covenant is actually the kind of at the leitmotif of our story as a Jewish people, and how does that, from the story of Abraham till today in 2022, what do you think that means?
First of all, I was honored to be a student of Rabbi Neil Gilman. I think that the incredible, awesome fact that we have been part of a covenant for 3,500 years. 3,500 years. Abraham lived some maybe 1,400 years before the Common Era. And that we have been part of this journey with God, in a relationship with God since the days of Abraham, and that we have not abandoned the covenant, and God has not abandoned the covenant with us for close to 3,500 years, is an awesome thing. We're not a race. We're not an ethnic group. We are a people. We are a nation that is bound by this covenant with Abraham. That's how we see and understand. There's no other way to understand ourselves, but to understand ourselves as a people, as a group of people who are bound by this covenant with God. And there are people who have joined the Jewish people, who are not born Jewish, born to Jewish parents, born to a Jewish mother or Jewish father, who have joined and been part of this covenant and been on this journey together with the rest of the community. And this covenant is a covenant with God, and it's a covenant with each other. This covenant obligates us and binds us to God. We have responsibilities to fulfill. And I wrote in the Torah Shabbat that came out yesterday, Heschel's teaching, that the Bible teaches us that life is not worth living without commitment. What is life without a commitment? Without a sense of obligation, of responsibility, of being bound to God and to other people, to values, to ideas that you devote yourself to, that you live for, not just for yourself, not just what's good for you. That's why it's so countercultural. The word appears here in our community covenant, that it's countercultural to not just live for yourself, what's good for you, what's comfortable, what's good for you and for those around you, but to extend this notion of interdependence, of responsibility, of commitment, both to God, to values that are divinely granted to us through a mysterious process of God's revelation to us. We're not going to go into that path in terms of explaining or trying to understand that theology, but there's something really powerful about the fact that we know that God has addressed us and continues to address us and call us to lift ourselves and to live for the sake of something much greater than ourselves, and to live for the sake of each other, for our human community, for society, for the planet, for the world. It's a powerful idea, and there's no other way to understand the Jewish people and who we are but through that idea, I believe.
Yeah, I always feel like, that moment of Theo lifted today, but when the Torah is lifted and we say V'zot HaTorah Asher Sa Moshe, that we could parse out whether we believe this is the Torah that Moshe actually wrote or whatever, but the sense that we're bound to this Torah, and that kind of commitment is expressed by saying this is ours. And in a sense, no matter what version of the Revelation story we choose or accept in that way, there's a sense that it's true, the power of this commitment that has been expressed for thousands of years, that as it morphs and changes, it still binds us in some form. And for all also we rail against some of it that doesn't all sit comfortably, the commitment actually to fight with is actually also a commitment. For all that doesn't always match up accordingly to where we particularly are or what the world needs in a given moment, but yet we still turn to it, to find the struggle, that it's the backdrop. That's the word I'm looking. Thank you.
Always here to come up with English. To be the story that we look to seek and ask questions. And I do think, that in a time that we're living, one of the reasons it's countercultural, besides a certain amount of focus on me, there's also often a resistance to giving up authority. Yeah. That, I get to decide, it's my decision. And there is a certain piece of that, I think that's true, that we wrestle with in modernity or post-modernity. But at the same time, I think one of the things, and my teacher, Dr. Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, alav shalom, in his book, Renewing the Covenant, speaks to the power actually of community to create authority. When you're in community, when you're in relationship, whether that's with God and with community, the command that comes from being in that relationship, no relationship is without demand. Any relationship that's true and real actually claims on us in some kind of form. And a relationship that always returns back to I get to decide is actually not a real relationship. It's not a true relationship because it doesn't lay claim on us. And we really, against the culture of our time, want to create a community, desire to create a community, and also see the manifestations of the power of community when people feel that the community and the commitment to the community and the commitment to Torah lays claim on them, so that they're being commanded
to respond.
It actually honors a person to be demanded, to be wanted, to be something that I want from you, that I need from you. It actually elevates us. It's very prevalent that you are a member of something, you pay something in order to get. You pay for a service. Many people see community this way. I pay my dues, and I want the community to be there for me, to be there for life cycle ceremonies, to be there when, God forbid, somebody dies in my family, to comfort me, to be there for me. And that's the wrong way to see it. It's always a multi-way street. You're there for me, I'm there for you. That's the ethos of this community, to be there for each other. People were walking around who are part of the Shabbaton committee with a button that says, ask me. And it's, of course, for people to say, where is the community dinner? Where is the lunch? Where is this session? Ask me. But I think in a much deeper way, everybody here should have this button that says, ask me. Ask me. Ask of me, not a question. Ask me to do something. Ask me to step up for you. And you know what? In this community, people do it. That's the strength and the beauty of this community. People are ready. A very significant, not everybody's there yet, but a very significant number of people in this community are ready to do that.
I think also I just want to say about that, what we found also is that it's very hard to people to ask. And a community that is a sense builds that kind of relation, that kind of web, that kind of understanding, it's less hard to then ask for help. When you build that kind of binding together, it's not you don't have to ask, first of all, because it comes often before. You don't have to ask for food for a Shiva home because people are pouring in. You don't have to ask for a visit for Bikor Cholim because you have that web in the community. But another thing that we really want is that sense of commitment, that you don't have to feel afraid to ask also, because you know that you'll be responded to, which is part of what we see in this community all the time. People who have been doing the mitzvah of nichum avelim, of comforting mourners, and then all of a sudden it's their turn, because inevitably it's always going to be our turn at some point. And the responsiveness that people get is just so deeply powerful. And that sense of being bound in that way. So
this is the document that contains what we ask of each other and what we are binding ourselves to as a community. We've been a community for almost 200 years. We are the inheritors of a community that has lived for almost 200 years. Our bicentennial is going to be in 2025. Think about it. And we are here as the descendants, spiritual descendants of those who founded this community. And from time to time, and it's important that we remind ourselves, what are we here for? That we connect and that we recalibrate our sense of what it means to be part of this community, to belong to each other. And this is the work that has been done during the year of Shemitah. Last year was a year of Shemitah, a year of pausing and reflecting and assessing and examining our relationship to many things, to the earth, to each other, to our work, to our rest, to community, to justice, and so on. And one of the things that was examined is, what is the meaning of community? And so I think 400 people participated.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that actually many years ago, when the Me Too movement rose up, there were questions: how do we assure that our community is committed to not causing pain? And how do we make accountable our community? How do we call people out? Should there be something? There's nothing that says this is what we believe. And over the years, there have been moments when we have strayed from the path, when we feel folks aren't being treated with kindness, or sometimes our staff isn't treated generously. very transactional. Or if community members don't agree with one another and it becomes hard, and instead of becoming a generous argument, it becomes a not so nice argument. And so it's not only because of the aspiration, it's because we know we're humans and we make mistakes. And so this was born out of the notion, and it's been in the works for a long time to create the covenant, but it was actually at the Shemitah year that we realized this is the moment to actually really think about that aspiration, to pause, and all the work that was done, all the lectures, all the conversations around, as Rolly said, those topics, when people weighed in, we heard the comments. They were cataloged. And then there were a number of people, when we asked questions during Shavuot, during the counting of the Omer about different nature of community, people weighed in on a either video or typing. And so we all year have been collecting responses. And so about 400 people weighed in. You may not even know that you weighed in because you didn't think, I'm just responding to that question. And then I just want to, I don't know, Shuli is in the back, Rabbi Shuli Passauer, Director of Community Engagement, who really has shepherded this process and was the main writer of the covenants. And then there were 26 community covenant readers who read the responses to all those questions, all the cataloging of the information, and then kind of highlighted what they thought was most important. And we had conversations about what are the values that was behind all that, which bore then this document, and highlighted the core values that we wanted to have, that we heard and aspired to, and that's how this came to be.
So let's have it read now.
Yeah, so
Shuli,
come. And we have a number of members who are part of the covenant reading.
So I know it sounds a little bit heavy, all of this talk about covenant, but if you take a moment to think about why are you here today? You're here because someone asked you, you're here because God asked you, you're here out of a relationship with this community, with the family of the Bat Mitzvah, with other members here, and how much joy and how much love we are feeling in this space today. That is coming out of the commitments to one another. So I want to invite everybody to rise. And look around. Take a peek in a corner of the sanctuary that you haven't looked at today. And see who's here. People whose names you know and people whose names you don't know. Everyone here is part of this community, part of this covenant of love and joy and mutual obligation. So we are going to read the values of the covenant. These are some of the community covenant readers. And when we conclude, I will invite everyone to affirm your participation in this covenant with the words Na'aseh v'nishma, the words that Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, said at the moment of accepting the original covenant at Sinai, knowing that we are, as Rolly said, inheritors of that covenant that is 3,500 years old, and that there's always a process of renewal of covenant and bringing it to life in the context of where we live, the community we live in, the time that we live in. And this is our moment for that. Parshat Nitzavim in Sefer Devarim tells us, you stand this day, all of you, before God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, every householder, your children, your wives and husbands, even the stranger within your camp, from woodchopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of your God, which your God is establishing with you this day.
At Judaism's core is the belief that we are linked as a people in a covenantal relationship with God and as individuals in a covenantal relationship with each other. Being a member of B'nai Jeshurun means being part of this broader Jewish covenant.
It also offers us the opportunity to build and sustain our community and its shared values by declaring them and by entering into a covenant that reflects who we are and aspire to be. We declare that these are the values that the B'nai Jeshurun community believes in and that we will strive to fulfill every day.
Chesed, caring connections and relationships. We believe the foundation of community is connection and relationships. We must build and tend to those relationships and care for one another.
Kavod, honor. We strive to honor the dignity and divine spark of all human beings.
Ometz, courage. We aspire to be spiritually and communally courageous.
Achrayut ve'arevut hadadit, responsibility and interdependence. We are interconnected and interdependent with all life. We must take seriously our responsibility for the earth and its inhabitants and to pursue a just and peaceful world.
Omek Ruchani, spiritual depth. We are a community firmly committed to Jewish tradition, spiritual innovation, and intentional religious practice.
We draw deep from the well of our tradition and wide from the global Jewish community to engage in meaningful and evolving prayer, ritual, and learning.
Avodah, service. We give ourselves to co-create and sustain this community, both when it is easy and convenient and when it is not.
The notion of covenant and mutual obligation is one that is deeply countercultural to our world, which so often privileges the individual over the needs and health of the collective. It is our hope that this community covenant will help us live in Judaism's charge to push against this dominant culture in order to create a more just and caring community and a more just and caring society overall. I invite you to join me in saying, Na'aseh v'nishma.
Shakur. Shakur. Yashar Koach. I invite you to read, to take home this document, to read it and study it, and to look at also at the implementation, how this covenant is implemented in our day, today, in our lives as a community, how each of these values lives, and we aspire to make them live in our community. I invite you to rise.